I'm Simon Franklin. I'm from here, Department of Slavonic Studies. And if I can very briefly introduce one sort of local parochial note, I'd like first of all to thank Rory and Stanley for this event. I've been in this department for several decades, and for most of the period that I've been here, a conference like today's and tomorrow's would have been unthinkable. In an age when, in this country at any rate, what is now tends to be called language-based area studies is considerably under threat. It's hugely gratifying that we have such vibrant new initiatives resulting in this and many other events, I should say, keep coming back for all the things which are happening here, both in Ukrainian and in Polish studies. After the wonderful opening address by Frank Sissin, if our speakers maintain that standard, we're in for a wonderfully stimulating couple of days. The next 2 hours, we're going to wrap up the current crisis. We have 4 distinguished speakers, varied speakers. The organizers of the conference have made the chair's task easier, almost redundant, in that in your programs you have potted biographies of everybody. So rather than tell you who people are, I'd merely refer you to your program notes and you can discover. And I will simply ask them one by one in sequence to come to the microphone and give their talks. The order of events, I've been instructed by the organizers, is that we will take all the presentations in sequence and then have a general discussion afterwards rather than discussing each individual paper after the paper. Speakers have been told that they have, I gather, 15 minutes. We will be a little bit flexible, but not excessively flexible in that, so that we can allow plenty of time for discussion for the other speakers. I might start fretting a little bit by the time we get to 17 and a half minutes. If I cough loudly, then take note. But without any more from me, I'd like to hand over to Yaroslav Hrytsak from the Ukrainian Catholic University in Lviv. After Giedroyc, now what?
Thank you so much, Professor, for a kind introduction. Thank you, Rory and Simon, for this remarkable event, which I hope will bear some kind of the impact on the intellectual framework of our future relations. We are living through the very tumultuous years, which we roughly or generally describe as a crisis, and actually this crisis undoubtedly has an impact on the life of each of us, including mine. I have my personal crisis, which means I'm moving more and more away from the words of academic and I become more and more public. You know, there's a danger that more public you are, the less intellectual you are, which sometimes happens. So actually, if I may have choice, I probably will continue the line that was suggested by Professor Sisson. I will go talk about the Ivan Franko, and his kind of impact on this Polish-Ukrainian relations, specifically on his poem, Edicted Disparates, when many was seminal. But I would talk about something else, which I will focus on the current crisis, and I will do it both as a historian and as a person who is participating in public debates. So, in a way, I am both analyzing Polish-Ukrainian relations from historical review, from historical perspective, but also practicing them from time to time. And I know where I'm more successful, so to say, in analyzing or practicing them. For sure, I have my share of failures, but I may claim also some modest successes. Probably my biggest success was the Polish-Ukrainian reconciliation over Orlonta Cmentarz, which probably I don't believe that we need to have introduction here for this audience what Orlonta Cmentarz was, the role in the kind of conflict, also the imagination of the conflict, Polish-Ukrainian relation 20th and 20th century. For sure, this was not my own personal success. There was a group of my colleagues, both from Poland and Ukraine, who were working on that. But by planning this event, we intentionally use the history. More specifically, we use the famous exchange of the Polish and German bishops when they use this formula, forgive us as we forgive you. And this we measured, designed our event by inviting only public figures from the different civic societies. Intentionally, we haven't invited any state clerk or a state figure not to have this kind of parallel, but also we also important, we put a very strong emphasis on the religious dimension. And to that effect, we had two heads of the church, Roman Catholic and Greek Catholic Church, which made this kind of joint prayer over the tombs and grace Ukrainian Polish soldiers. And at a certain moment, they pronounced this formula, "Forgive us as we forgive you," and this had an effect. Believe me that before that, in Lviv, we have a very strong animosities against Poles in connection with the Cmentarz. Nowadays, nobody really talks about this kind of animosities. You go visit the city is very friendly. Polish language is heard everywhere, and you don't have this kind of the memory. People not even remember what was the bone of contention, so to say. We tried to repeat this formula, this success, 12 years later, in 2013, when there was again new anniversary of Volhynia massacre. We did it on the event on the place where there was one of the biggest massacre. In the village was the biggest massacre, which also has two cemeteries, Polish and Ukrainian ones. We convoted the leaders of the churches from both sides, which is in Volhynia many. So to say, there's a lot of public figure. But basically failed, that nothing has happened. Many colleagues are sitting here were participating in this event, and this kind of very interesting thing, because on the one hand, there is one circumstance, one locality when the formula works, and which is about the First World War and the Polish-Ukrainian war which followed, and there is another context, which is Volhynia, which didn't work. In a sense, it helps me, this kind of both success and failures help me to rethink what went wrong and what went right. And here I specifically would like to refer to my article, which I has written, published some 9 years ago, in 2006, on the conference which were devoted to the Gedroit's biography in context Polish-Ukrainian relations. And this article, this paper, has the same title, After Gedroit's, So What, or What Now? And I presume you haven't read this article. So therefore, let me just reiterate two main points of this article. First of all, I was concerned about the pettiness of the discussion on the future Ukrainian relation, for future Polish-Ukrainian relation, which is people were talking of very simple things, which are many varieties in that, but I believe there is something which was missing with a larger context. So what I have suggested, the 2 points of this discussion, first of all, I believe that what has been occurred in Polish-Ukrainian relations since the fall of the communism could be rightly named as geopolitical revolution. Moreover, I would say that the recent Polish-Ukrainian relation could be regarded as a tantamount to the French-German reconciliation in the 50s, to the extent the French-German reconciliation in the 50s laid a cornerstone for future Europe, which was rather based on the scheme or system of national reconciliation. To the same extent, in very much like a French-German reconciliation, Polish-Ukrainian reconciliation created a chance to extend, if not the European Union, at least the spirit of union further east. And second point, for sure, and I believe Karolina Wygóra will say that, Polish and Ukrainian reconciliation was not the only reconciliation that Gedroitz was focusing on. He clearly understands, as being realist, that you have to add Russia here, because without reconciliation with Russia, it would work. So in this sense, once you have Polish-Ukrainian reconciliation completed, you have to have as a further step to have a rich Polish-Russian and respectively Polish-Ukrainian reconciliation. But then, as they say in Poland, it takes two to tango. And Putin doesn't seem to be a willing dancer. He doesn't understand the language of the recognition and the formula. Forgive us, he treats us as a kind, not a strength, moral strength, but as a kind of weakness. So my point was that if we ever will come to the Polish-Russian-Ukrainian reconciliation, we have to first reach Ukrainian-Ukrainian reconciliation, for two specific reasons. First was giving the geopolitical significance of Ukraine, which is evident even more nowadays. And secondly, because a large part of Ukrainians, they are Russian speakers, and they feel themselves closer to Russian culture. So therefore, by reaching Ukrainian reconciliation, you build a link, a perspective, a possibility for the further Russian-Ukrainian reconciliation. Unfortunately, it didn't work. Nowadays, we have a quite clear situation, and then this is my idea. Also, what ambition is to rethink this my paper, what is left, what is still left. What could you think about these terms? Before I proceed, let me just describe what I understand as a crucial factor, or crucial new factors in understanding nowadays situation in post-Ukrainian colonization. First is evident, the war. It doesn't really matter to what extent it's a hybrid war or a new war, it's still a war. And since there are war, I believe any kind of talks about Polish, Russian, or Ukraine, specifically Russian-Ukrainian colonization, seems to be nowadays far-reaching illusion. We could clearly, so to say, discuss it. And what is new here, which has already been there implicitly 20 or 10 years ago, but now it's quite evident. So in the stake with the Polish-Ukrainian relations is not Poland and Ukraine per se. It's a future and shape of the future in Eastern Europe. Nowadays, it's more than that. It's also the future of Europe, if you wish. It's a global issue, which is recognized by many things. This conflict, which made it very evident. Within this enlarging context, quite of a sudden, Poland is losing its factor, its importance with this kind of solution of this crisis, and it's been demonstrated by the fact that Poland has not been invited in the Minsk negotiations, so to say, and that largely Poland nowadays doesn't play any kind of major role with this kind of process, which is considered a bit all called the Minsk agreement. That's a very simple thing. I don't believe it would raise some kind of discussion. But there's, I believe, other thing which I believe is much more important and which is missing from our analysis, because I do believe that in both Nazi society, in Poland and specifically in Ukraine, we are now facing or experiencing a tremendous shift. I must say a tectonic shift in our politics, both Polish and Ukrainians. But that fact, I don't mean the Euromaidan per se, which is by its fact was very eventful position, I would say, of global importance. Also, I don't mean the recent results of the presidential elections, which was also kind of dramatic in Poland, which is also kind of dramatic, if not revolutionary character. What I mean here, some kind of the changes which would have a much more long-term effect than certain events, and by that, I mean the emergence of new generation in both Poland and Ukraine. The generation, post-communist generation, does neither experienced, not even have a kind of idea of what really communism look like, and for sure, change of generation is a natural process. There's probably nothing here to discuss. It will be much more expected. Still, and I would claim here that what is much important is the current change may be different from the other ones, in a sense that nowadays we seem to facing generational gap. There are some surveys that suggest that we now facing, specifically in Ukraine, a gap between the values between the younger generation, those are between 8 and 35, and the generations like mine. To a large extent, Euromaidan was their revolution. And I wouldn't go there because it invites some kind of discussion here, but take it by the face value that this was their revolution as a result of a major generation. And as we know it, from the recent analysis of the Polish presidential elections, the result of this election was also, to a large extent, result of the specific behavior of new generation. If I could discuss this generation's impact with the context of Polish-Ukrainian relations, I would probably reduce this analysis to one simple sentence, that it seems to me that this generation doesn't have, or do not have, because we're talking generations in plural, do not have this emotional commitment to the Polish-Ukrainian relations like we did, or the generation of Francis and others did. To a very simple reason, because for us, and this probably confirmed to my colleagues like Mykola Repchuk, who we are, to a large extent, was shaped by our impact on us by Polish culture, mass culture, Polish radio, Polish literature, things like that. In a way, Poland for us, it's a kind of irony, that even being communist, Poland for us in the Soviet Ukraine was a window for the West. And therefore, since we were in this formative years, in 70s, 80s, it to a large extent explains why we're that much so committed, why somehow so say, contribute to this kind of Polish-Ukrainian reconciliation. This factor doesn't work anymore in case of the younger generation, especially Ukrainian generation. They don't need any kind of window, because they have doors wide open, specifically nowadays when the Polish government offers several, don't have numbers, but several dozens, thousands of stipends or fellowships for the young Ukrainians to come to Poland to learn in the university, also to fill demographic gaps for a variety of reasons which are now existing in Poland. Third fact, which I believe is also of crucial importance here, which made a kind of radical difference, that we seems to facing a diminishing role of the two leading institutions, which has been playing a very important role, sorry for tautology, in the Polish-Ukrainian reconciliation. By that institutions, I mean first of all church, and secondly, if I say again this new left, figures have been presented by the Adam Michnik and Jacek Kuroń, Solidarność, who were very instrumental for the articulating the attitudes of Poland toward Ukraine. I know that from the story of Adam Michnik, who told me how it happened that Poland was the first to recognize independence of Ukraine. They did intentionally, Michnik and Kuroń called Valenza, not to miss the point, to congratulate the first. They were sitting by telephone in the deep night, waiting when their results were announced to be the first, which shows something to us. In a sense, I believe that we tend to exaggerate the role of the Kultura and Jerzy Gedrich, which undoubtedly is very great. But by focusing on Gedrich and Kultura, we tend to miss other milieus, so to say. And I would say one of the more important milieus was this new left, anti-communist left that emerged in the 70s, presented by the people Adam Michnik and Jacek Kuroń. I also want to confirm what Frank Sisson was saying. I know it from many friends, including Henryk Litvin, who is the very good historian, but happens to be now ambassador to Ukraine. He also says that for him, in shaping his attitude to Ukraine, the most important figure was not Gedrich, but Hrytsak. And he says that in many ways, those generation has been shaped by this idea. But here I would focus on the one of the agents, which is the church. If you're talking in larger context, we're talking about the system of the European reconciliations, plural. We quite often missing one of the crucial point. They were mostly designed and implemented by the figure of the Christian pedigree, who belonged literally to Christian parties, both in French and in Germany. And then German, Polish reconciliation, which was very much within the framework of this church. For sure, I wouldn't discuss here the role of Jan Paul II, which is quite evident here. But in any way, without this dimension, you could hardly. And I also know, since I belong to the Greek Catholic Church, I know how much effort has been, given by the clergy of Greek Catholic Church in 70s and 80s, long before the communism has collapsed, to be to be part of this meaningful dialogues between two churches. So I just want to build contrast here. So in contrast to what the role church played in the 70s, 80s, and the 90s, again, here I want to refer to our experience with the Orlenta, with this participation of the church, which I believe was crucial. It doesn't seem to have this factor anymore. We are losing that. One example probably will do. Nowadays, the head of the Greek Roman Catholic Church is Edmund Mukrzycki, who happened to be a secretary of Jan Paul II. During the anniversary of the Volhynia massacre, we very much counted on him, on his participants. He refused for a variety of reasons, but also he publicly says that he no longer sees the formula forgive us as we forgive you as applicable to the situation. He claims that it is the task of Ukrainians and challenge to Ukrainians to say forgive us. And Poles are exempted for providing excuse because they have to reconsider. It basically says that Ukrainians have to pronounce it 3 times And then Poles have to reconsider where there was sincere or not, so to say, which is quite divergence from the ethos of the John Paul II. We used to joke nowadays that we counted very much that Holy Spirit descends from the Pope to his secretary, which seems not to be the case in the Polish-Ukrainian relation. But it seems to be we could not count anymore that much on the participation of the church, which probably is not the case in our church. Say, Boz Huzar, previous head of the church, was very sensitive to this issue, and the new one, Shevchuk, but there's also Orthodox Church of Kiev Patriarchate and Moscow Patriarchate. It seems they're not quite willing to engage in this kind of a dialogue which has come to religion. And where do I stand? Let me just check. Okay, 2 minutes. So, if I may conclude here, first of all, let's face it, we entered in a serious crisis, and we wishful thinking to pretend that we may escape it or it will end in the foreseeable future. We have to learn with this crisis because it will be for long, including, fortunately, the war. But by claiming that, I don't really see that we have to change the paradigm itself by the weakening of certain elemental things like that. Just let me provide you with some very short recommendation, time is left. What's supposed to be done? Firstly, and I believe this Cambridge conference provides you with a good framework for that. First of all, if you want to have a meaningful discussion of Polish-Ukrainian reconciliation, let's extend the context and let's have not only Poles and Ukrainians being there. Because clearly, Polish-Ukrainian reconciliation is a part of the European agenda, global agenda. Therefore, we had this discussion have to meet this character of agenda. Secondly, if you want to have a meaningful discussion, you have to specifically focus on the younger generation. Specifically with this younger generation, you have to define milieus and communities which may work in creation some kind, how should I say, metaphysical dimension of this reconciliation to prove this kind of business. And there I would say probably two milieus, one of the Catholic Church, another of the leftist milieu. Like my Ukrainian Catholic University, which is very much engaged in this dialogue, or similarly, Krytyka Polityczna in Kyiv. This is leftist milieu, new leftist milieu, which may be very, say, breathing space for exerting new formula. And thirdly, last but not least, very important, we don't have to focus on Kyiv and Lviv only. Because nowadays, as a result of the war in Ukraine, we have a new political geography in Ukraine, which is radically different than previous before the war. Which means, if I may say so, before the war, we have a strong axis Kyiv-Lviv, which made this kind of axis orange Ukraine, so to say. And there was the another Ukraine, which is the Yanukovych Ukraine, which is a part of this Ukraine. Nowadays, it's very much different. Nowadays, there's a new city that emerged, which has a very pro-Ukrainian position, pro-Kyiv position, even not being necessarily Ukrainian-speaking, and this is Dnipropetrovsk. And this is new axis, Lviv-Kyiv-Dnipropetrovsk, which keeps this Ukraine, and which is largely responsible for the failure of so-called Russian Spring in Ukraine, Ruskaya Vesna. So what I'm saying here, if you want to have a kind of meaningful discussion, we have to invite, introduce, integrate those intellectuals in this discussion because they may be of crucial importance. This is not my words. This is word of the Adam Michnik. He said before the Vilnius summit, he said that looks like that future Ukraine, specifically future of Ukrainian ambitions, now would be resolved not in Kyiv or Lviv, which is already there on the European part, but the cities like Donetsk, like Dnipropetrovsk, like Kharkiv, and like Odessa. The new political geography in Ukraine says that basically we have a new dividing line, and this is front line. And Dnipropetrovsk is now part of the axis. The crucial issue whether Odessa and Kharkiv will be closer to this part of the L5 or be on the other side. Judging by the political events, developments, and also surveys, it seems that Odessa and Kharkiv are now tending to the direction of Kyiv and Dnipropetrovsk. We don't have to lose this chance. So what I'm basically saying, this is three factors we have to work with by extending. So we don't have to change the paradigm. Paradigm is still there. We're here to define new actors and also extend the conflict to have this meaningful discussion. Thank you so much.